already, right? Like, but we're now live everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Welcome to another episode of The Good Life. Um, we're here, guys. Hey, we're switching it up. I don't know if any of you on Instagram are joining us or popped over to our Instagram that we just had for an hour, but we are giving people the inside look for the first hour now of how we get this process going, talking about the good life. We want to engage with you. We want to get your feedback. We want you to engage with us on these topics. So we were just an hour before on Instagram, and now we're live everywhere else. Here another Wednesday night to give you a show for the good life, guys. How's everybody's night going? Good?
Good. I'm glad we're already scratched the surface. We're already ready to get into the meat right now.
We're already in there. Kobi, you gotta unmute yourself. There's gonna be a job. You gotta unmute yourself on your StreamYard. So are you in your StreamYard, bro? Your StreamYard, the computer straight in front of you. You gotta unmute that one too. No, okay. So we got a lot. There we go. Hey, how are you? There we go. Good. We got a lot of technology going here. A lot of technology, but it's all to bring it to you guys so that you get some more nuggets on the good life, on what it means to live the good life, on health, wealth, love, happiness, some of the things that we need to talk about in order to get to that place. That's what we're here to talk about. We just had an interesting conversation about marriage, which falls under that relationship side of the love part of the good life. We were having a real good conversation about marriage and the institution of marriage. Kobi brought up that word, the institution of marriage, and how we view it in our society right now. So that's the topic we're going to talk about a bit to just get this thing started, because again, relationships play a huge role in your ability to live a good life, to live the life you're designed to live, that you want to live. It's really going to come down to the fact that you are also that you have great relationships around you, whether they be romantic relationships, platonic relationships. It doesn't matter. You've got to have the ability to have good relationships if you want to live the good life. So that's what we're going to talk about a bit. Let's riff for a bit, guys. Let some people file in.
And, Stu, you want, or Chris, or maybe Stu, you want to give a quick recap of what we've hit so far?
Yeah, for sure.
Or actually where we want to go?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things coming up right now. And just real quick to tie this back to the good life, how many people grew up imagining how their good life in their dreams was going to have either the wife or the other perspective, the husband? So like when we talk about marriage, I just want to make it real clear. We've all, to some degree, I think there's a couple of exceptions to the rule, but we've all had this ideology placed on us that the good life has to have the wife or the husband. We've all, and this kind of dives into this institution of marriage. I mean, like every Disney thing that was put out there, man and a woman, like connection, like that's like, I think the most ridiculous one is how the woman's always like in some ridiculous situation until she finds a man. So we could go into that for a long time. But to me, what we talked about before was all of the different, I think Kobi brought it up, the different like 3 levels of a marriage. Like, the contract of compatibility and you wanting to choose and spend the rest of your life and what that definition looks like, the legality that's tied to it, the family aspect that's tied to it, and how your family culture or your family's decisions are either subconsciously or verbalized as what you should be taking into consideration. Like, is it really just you and this person making this decision together, or does your family have something to say about it? And how large of a voice does that family get? Could be even brought up an example, like, if there's if there's pushback from your family on who you want to choose as your wife, what do you do with that? And I think there are some people that decide to go with what the family says. There are some people that decide to go with what their heart says and what they're saying as a couple. So I think we really touched on a lot of different things. And I think another favorite point that came up in the prep to this whole thing, which we don't on Instagram, from 7 to 8 right before this, y'all. So the other important point that came up was communication and how things change from when you get married to like your viewpoints that change as you get older, both together and separately. Maybe you got something going on there where you, all of a sudden, like, one person's growing in one direction, one person's growing in another. What do you do with that? Well, we're all of the same mind that you talk about it, because I think the biggest thing in any relationship, if we're gonna make this, a bit of, you mentioned earlier how relationships are a fundamental piece of the good life. To me, the fundamental piece of any relationship is open, honest communication, even when it's hard. And a point I didn't get to, so I'm gonna go ahead and drop this now and then hand it over to Kobi, is we were talking about how it's hard to be honest with your partner, but it's actually easier in the long run because you don't dig yourself into a hole. You don't create a rift in where you guys are going. And all of a sudden one day somebody's like, hey, I got to end this. And the other person's like, I thought we were doing fine. What the hell is this?
Exactly.
So yeah, man, I mean, that's happened to me and it's not fun. And those things can be completely taken care of if you address the little things at a time. Like, anyways, that we talked about a lot of different stuff. So marriage as a fundamental piece of the good life. Where are we going to take this from here, fellas?
Listen, I pulled a few things up here.
Hey, real quick,
Greg.
Greg just agreed with you, Stu, right? That direct, honest feedback, real time, always.
In real time, yeah.
Great job.
Shout out, Greg.
That is awesome. Thank you, Greg, for that comment.
What is
man.
CLTC? Do you know, Chris?
I don't. All right,
Greg, sorry to put you on the spot like that, man.
It's okay. There's a lot of those things, those what are they, suffixes that I have no idea what they are.
Yeah, acronyms. Yeah. So I thought this was really interesting, man. This is coming from theweek.com, and it hits on how old is the institution, right? The origins of marriage. And this thing goes, I thought maybe I'll read this out because I think it's kind of interesting to put this into perspective as to like where I'm coming from historically speaking. Because, all right, it goes, how old is the institution? The best available evidence suggests that about 4,350 years ago, for thousands of years before that, most anthropologists believe families consisted of loosely organized groups of as many as 30 people with several male leaders, multiple women shared by them, and children. As hunter-gatherers settled into their agrarian civilization, society had a need for more stable arrangement. Said who? I don't know.
Yeah, where did that come from?
Yeah, that's what it says, right?
Instagram, fact check.
Yeah. The first recorded evidence of marriage ceremonies uniting one man and one woman dates back as far as about 2350 BC in Mesopotamia. Fact check. Who knows? Over the next several hundred years, marriage evolved into a widespread institution embraced by ancient Hebrews, Greeks, and Romans. Notice, forget all the black people, right? But back then, marriage had little to do with love or religion, right? So this is where I want us to pay attention. Marriage primary purpose, according to these folks, was to bind women to men and thus guarantee that men's children were truly their biological heirs. Through marriage, a woman became a man's property. In the betrothal ceremony of ancient Greece, a father would hand over his daughter with these words, I pledge my daughter for the purpose of producing legitimate offsprings. Among the ancient Hebrews, men were free to take several wives. Married Greeks and Romans were free to satisfy their sexual urges with concubines, prostitutes, and even teenage male lovers. A lot of teenage male lovers. While their wives were required to stay home and tend to the household. Right, this part right here, this last part I give y'all. As the Roman Catholic Church became the powerful institution in Europe, shout out, of the blessings of the priest became necessary, right? So here's where the church steps in, and the only way to really get married is with a priest, right? And the priest is the only one that can bless a marriage for marriage to be legally recognized. So church and state, okay? So for it to be legally recognized, which is still the truth now, it has to be blessed by a priest, right? Still true now, by the way. By the 8th century, a marriage was widely accepted in the Catholic Church as a sacrament or ceremony to bestow God's grace. All right. So this is when I say I don't agree with the institution of marriage, this is the type of stuff I'm talking about. Right? I'm not talking about what we talked about earlier in our pre-call. I'm talking about this type of stuff, right? It don't make any sense to me.
You mean like the intent behind it?
The whole intent behind it.
Yeah.
The intent behind it, every single part of the way, yeah. Right? And also the church's role in that, to me, fundamentally had nothing to do with spirituality. It had nothing to do with anything. All it had to do with power, because the church was the power, right? The church was, right? The priest essentially functioned as the highest reigning king for however long they functioned, and still kind of do, in cahoots with the state to dictate these things. When I say there was another way to do it, you in here it says what? Greeks, Romans, and Hebrews. Hello, those weren't the only people here on this earth. And in fact, there were the Moorish kingdom was here far before they were, and far more successful and far more prosperous. How did they do it? No mention of any of that anywhere. So when I say that we have adopted the Greek, Roman, and Hebrew way of viewing marriage, as everybody should view it that way, and everybody should do it that way, both legally and societally speaking. And quite frankly, I think it's bullshit.
There it is.
That's why I don't agree with it.
There it is.
Love it.
Getting back to the origins, right? Getting back to I don't think this is a practice that enough people do. I honestly don't think, right? I don't think we take things in as they come. We never really question why. We've talked about this before in the Good Life, just being a critical thinker, right? Just going deeper and saying, like, why is it this way? Why is that this way? How did it get this way?
Mm-hmm.
Follow the money. Right.
Follow the history too. Yeah.
That's it. Follow the history. Like where things.
The history follows the money.
See? Right. So like when
the history follows the money.
When you start to dig a few layers, you start to realize like, maybe this isn't as kind of innocent as we think. Like the way we think about marriage, the way we think about it was adopted.
It was heavily. Right? And the thing that really always gets me, man, as being someone who grew up in the church, is the role of the church in all of this. It was never about spirituality. It was never about any of that. It was about power and thus money. That's what it was about.
Can you elaborate on that?
In here, yeah. Well, let's see here. Well, when did the religion become involved? As the Roman Catholic Church became a powerful, or the most powerful institution in Europe, the blessing of the priest became a necessary step for marriage to become legally recognized.
Sure.
What's that got to do with spirituality?
Yeah. Oh, you want a wife? Well, you're going to have to go through us to do that. Oh, and we're going to charge you to do it too.
Yeah. And all this, I'll point out, by the way, this all comes right around the time that Constantine gathers everything into what we now know as modern religion. All right.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Kobi, like real quick, like stay on this because I think it's important. You being someone that grew up in the church, then what is the church's role? What is the role of religion in a relationship? Is there a role? Should that are those governing bodies, for lack of better term? Like, how do you think about it then?
Let me better understand your question a little bit before I go off into something that doesn't answer that. You're saying, what is the role of religion, or what is religion and the church? Not the same thing,
right? Not the same thing. Definitely
okay.
Understand that side. But when it comes to like being in a lot, so I'll tell you, I'll give you context, and then you can kind of answer the question.
Yeah. Please.
I being a man of faith, right? Being a Christian, Christ follower, like I use the Bible for guidelines to how to love my wife.
I like how you said guidelines.
Yeah. Guidelines of how to love my wife, of how a husband should operate in a family, like in their family. I use that as the guideline. But if you're saying, marriage never had anything to do with the church, or I mean, I guess, do you believe that it
spirituality,
right,
not the church?
It has nothing to do with the church, but it does. You do believe that there's a heavy spiritual aspect to people coming together. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with Christianity. That has nothing to do with the Bible. That has nothing to do with the church, because spirituality exists in many different forms, right?
True.
Spirituality literally exists in hundreds and hundreds of different forms. So what the Roman Catholic Church has successfully done is indoctrinated us to believe that they are one and in the same, and they're not, right? So, and two individuals can unite, and in fact, if you say use the Bible
without making a declaration before God, because like that is
they can't.
How we know it though, right? That's how we know that. Hence why, right? Like a priest had to become, right? So a lot of our marriage ceremonies are very much so you're doing this, right? In honor for God, right? Like in the presence of God. Like there's very much so that aspect of our marriage ceremonies. And do you think
if you're talking Christianity in the West, yeah.
You don't think?
But there exists the other half of the world.
And I'm maybe just me being ignorant to other religions or other things, right? Like,
yeah, so well, let's look at it.
I mean, there's no, I'm sure that there is some form of religious practice associated with the marriages of other people in other societies, in other countries, in other places around the world.
Sure. But those look very different than what we're talking about just now.
How so? Because to me, obviously I'm kind of like the odd duck here, because to me, the church and religion,
Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, Sikh.
But this doesn't apply to Islam?
But there's like religious ceremony around marriage when you're a Sikh or when you practice Islam, right? Like
I'm acknowledging spirituality.
Okay.
But a lot of the context in which you're talking about applies to Christianity.
Sure.
And I'm drawing our attention to the larger picture. Okay. Right. But I'm drawing our attention to the larger picture. And that when we look at it, we're thinking from the framework of Christianity. That's where this confusion is coming from. Sure. And again, I want to reiterate that that's the background I come from. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying it's wrong. I'm just saying our thinking, all three of us here on this panel and most of the people we engage with, is very narrow.
Because there's so many other ways around the world that people practice the joining of two people.
So many, and not just the ones that you and I can recognize, but those that exist even in I can point to various parts of various parts of Africa where you can't even Google it. It's not even really here as to like how they function and what guidelines they use and how they go about it. I still acknowledge spirituality, by the way. I still acknowledge that. But I'm saying the paradigm from which we're coming from, right, is very narrow. Right? Super narrow. And I think that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem, because it doesn't leave room for that, like for that one-on-one that you were describing a little earlier. It doesn't leave room for those things, for some of those things that some people may create to be okay.
Sure. Yeah, because there's only one path laid before you. If there was better education around how marriage is defined in other parts of the world, it would make it, I can actually say this as a fact, it would factually make it more likely that people are inclined to question and make a decision for their own on what their marriage is going to look like and who has their hand in it, religious wise or government wise or family wise.
I fundamentally agree.
And the other issue that is that the paradigm that we're coming from, right, has been married to the legal piece of it. All right, so now it's hard to separate.
Dude's membership.
I hate that shit so much. Get the government out of my goddamn relationship.
This is it. This is what we're running into. It's
my relationship is between me and my woman.
Yeah.
That's me. Nobody else. My parents can have their opinion. My friends can have their opinion. But it's up to us. But not according to the government.
We're in a different conversation now. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
When we get stuck in a pair, that's where you can be Christian and create with your partner what it is that you create with your partner, and you get kicked out the church. Or you can get ostracized in regular society, right? I was talking to a young, she wasn't young, she's older than me, a woman this past weekend who stated she was a faithful worshiper in her church, grew up in the church, went there in her particular church, right? And okay, I don't want us to, before I say this, I don't want us to get stuck on this particular example that I'm about to use here. I think there's bigger issues at play here, even little things as like, even smaller things. But she realized that she doesn't want to be with a man, period. She's like, sorry, it just wasn't working for me. That's not what I want in my life, right? She sought counseling from her past, sought counseling from da-da-da, and eventually they kicked her out of the church because they said, you are choosing this way of life and it's not compatible with how we do things here. So sorry, you can no longer be part of the church.
But I thought the church was supposed to be open arms to everyone.
That's what it's supposed to be, but that's not what happens when people get involved and you follow the money.
God forbid they found out you smoke a little weed.
Yep.
But see, and again, it's
so we got on Instagram, we got Dougal876. Traditionalism is also a major
shout
factor.
Out Dougal.
Yeah. Traditionalism is also a major factor in relationships and adds a lot of unnecessary pressure. Could not agree anymore with that statement. Following the boilerplate that you're a family. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I couldn't agree with that anymore. I mean, that really ties to the family piece. And Dougal, I don't know if you saw it earlier, but Kobi actually mentioned an example of where like family pressure was causing a difference of opinions of how to proceed in a relationship. And that family pressure is an exact example of that traditionalism. So there's traditionalism in the family, in the church and in the government and just society in general. There's all traditionalism around us, which to me leads to my biggest opponent in life, which is conformity. So
I really think that's an underlying thing on this show is our ability to push back against society's norms. And because technically what this is becoming more and more apparent, society's norms actually don't help you get to a good life.
No.
Right? They don't.
No. We'd be out of the job if it did.
That might be it. And the thing that's really interesting, fellas, I want to put on the table here as well is like, I'm a man of faith. But when I say that, what does that elicit? What thoughts did that bring it to your mind? All right. Because the more I find out about the context of faith that I grew up in, the more I realize that this was decided, created by a small group of people who literally went around the world and pushed it on everybody else.
Yeah.
Now, when I say created, I mean literally the Bible that I say a man of faith and I put out, that's not even the complete work. Mm-hmm. Right? Constantine literally goes out and says, I will decide what y'all get to read and call holy and put out. Then, and if that's true, and if what's true here is what always gets me is that, like, if that was it, how on earth do we have this division and 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 this version of Bible and this version and this version and this version? Religion. I could keep going. You get my point? Mm-hmm. So I look at it, I'm like, hold on. What was the true intention of these individuals? I'm sure some of them would definitely are here, they believe, right? But the original intent, the more I look, the original intent was not what I thought it was. It wasn't to set people free. It was to set people in bondage.
Religion.
The original intent was not to set people free. It was to actually set people in bondage. Yeah. It was to set control and to empower the Roman Catholic Church and their various divisions afterwards. So they get all the offerings, so they get all the money, so they make the rules, so they actually get to choose who is king and get to crown who is who and get to choose what is what and get to do what is what, right?
The church does not approve of this union. You know, you see that shit in like movies and stuff all the time. Yeah.
Yes. Although I'm over here potentially saying hi to little 6-year-old Simon. It's a problem. It's a huge problem. And once again, guys, I grew up in the church. So I'm the first to raise my hand here. I ain't speaking from something I don't know. I'm speaking from something I've seen with my own 2 eyes. You know, it's something I've seen with my own 2 eyes. And I'm still a man of faith. Please don't get me wrong now. But that and what man has created ain't the same thing.
Not at all. And that's 1,000% right? Like,
I would love to hear more about that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, you're good. I mean, I agree with that point. Like, Jefferson Blethke, I think that's his name. Jefferson Blethke wrote a book called Jesus is Greater Than Religion. And that started me on the journey of like understanding like the separation between these two, Stu. And I know that was a question. Yeah, right. Like there is a heavy separation between religion and, like Kobi is saying, spirituality, your creator, your relationship with, right, whomever you call the universe, your creator, whatever that is. But there's a stark difference between man-made religions and spirituality and your ability to connect with the person or the being that created you. That's it, right? And there's a big difference. And we're going down a religious path here because it's important, right, to have the conversation. But like, it's a big difference.
And gives us the context for what we're talking about as it comes to marriage, because that's how it was developed. Because before this, where did people love each other? Yes. Did people have babies? Yes. Did people have unions and agreements? Yes. Did people have all of these things in place? Yes.
Yep.
Yes, they had all the elements there. So what's been now rearranged into what we know, that's what we're questioning.
Yep. So I got so much I want to say on this because I've always been so curious about the difference, the specific. Like I understand, I think some of the high level stuff, but like the specific differences to you all about religion versus faith. Because for me, I don't know if I've ever gone into detail with you guys about my spiritual beliefs, but I don't really think it matters. That's my opinion on spiritual beliefs. I'm gonna do what I think is beneficial to myself, my community, as many people as around me, and whether or not I call somebody up there, Allah, Jesus, God, like all the different options that I'm not even familiar with. Does it matter? If heaven is a thing, if hell is a thing, if that is the quote unquote driving force of religion on why you should act a certain way, then what kind of God, and this may come off as like crazy, I don't know. But what kind of God would I be if I was given the gift of life by this gentleman or lady or whatever creature? Who would I be to say, if you don't worship me by this exact way and call me by this name and show up every Sunday and give money to these people, you don't get to come into paradise. I don't really care whether or not you try to do good in the world or if you were a fucking terrible person, but you confessed. So to me, the whole thing just never jived. So I basically I grew up, I mean, hell, Kobi and I grew up in a very, very similar church setting through our school. I think he had different church on the side than I did on the side, but in school, like just things did not make sense to me. And the whole time it just propelled me to atheism. And then here recently I've been noticing that some things just seem too coincidental. So it's allowed me to step into a bit more of an agnostic role. So maybe, I don't know if I'm a man of faith. I'm definitely a man of numbers. And to me, if I just run all these fucking equations in my head, man, if this person gave me life, I'm simply trying to use this life to do the most value and I can for my community, whether or not I, address you in the right way or practice gratitude in the right way, like, doesn't matter, because I've seen wars fought through history. I've seen just people like ostracized, like we were talking about earlier, for different types of beliefs. So that's my whole thing on it. But
that is, first off, it's a real thought. Aaron said he's happy to hear about it, Stu, because that's how he thinks about it. Right?
Word. Aaron, I appreciate you saying that, man. That actually provides me a lot of comfort. Thank you.
So and to be honest, bro, like, it's definitely a real thing. Like, it's not the first time I've even heard somebody say it, right? Like, because everything you said makes sense, right? Makes sense from how we think about it. Could be. I'm curious to hear you, man. I'm curious to hear your response to it.
I'll say this. universaltruthschool.com. Go ahead and if you want to dive in, go ahead and dive in. universaltruthschool.com. I don't get paid. I don't get nothing. All I do is come here and just drop knowledge. That's all I do. I come here and just drop knowledge.
Can I get a trailer or Spark Notes or something?
No, just look it up. He says Spark Notes or something. Just look it up.
That's not what I said.
But I'll say this in response to that. I'm a man of faith, because I seen it. You can't tell me, because you can't explain. What I mean by that is what scientists try to explain, as to whether there is this, they can't explain it. They can't explain it. All right, they haven't succeeded. They haven't succeeded. They haven't come anywhere close. This comes from my belief in health as pertains to our ancestor and our sensory knowledge of health and current modern day science, where I'm a man of science, taking shots and doing all these things. Yeah. But what your science is explaining right now, my grandmother was living that. It's just. So what's the distinction? What's the difference there? The difference is all that it's just a new language that attempts to explain something that's been there forever. It's a new language that's trying to explain something that's been there forever. What I push back on is not that there's substance. What I push back on is the organization of the elements that already exist into what we have now. What I mean by that is, whether you go with Roman Catholic or you go with non-denominational or you go to Buddhism, Hinduism, blah, 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 blah. It's just how the language is different. How the elements were organized is different. It's just different. But there's a truth somewhere in there that's universal. There's a truth somewhere in there that's universal. The story of Horus in Egypt lines up exactly with the story of Jesus in the Bible. That's not coincidence. Word for word lines up. And
Horse?
Jesus came out.
Did you say horse?
Horus.
Oh, Horus. Horus.
Yeah, Horus. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing that right, because my tongue's a little heavy. I'm African, y'all.
So I've
assimilated pretty well, but I'm African. Horus, yes, Horus. Horus.
Horus.
Oh, did we lose Chris? Oh, here we back.
No, I'm here.
All right. They lined up exactly. It also lines up with all the phenomenons we see in nature. All of them. When Jesus died, when Jesus rose again, all of them lined up. Right? So and when you look like Zoroastrianism, I believe it's called Zoroastrianism, I believe. You look at the story, then you look at the story of a horse, then you look at the story of Jesus. They all line up. They all line up.
When you say line
different
up,
language.
Real quick, when you say line up, meaning they're the same story.
The life of Jesus.
Right. Like meaning it's
the
like,
life of Jesus was born at this time, to these parents, did this, died at this or performed these miracles, traveled here, died at this time, rose again at this time, did this. They all line up.
As you're saying, as the same as the Horus before his time, like the same life that Horus lived, Jesus lived.
Correct.
Like all the same, right? So
100%.
Got you. So
zero deviations.
Where like let me ask the question. Like let me go down. What is the book that we find Horus in? Where do we find his story? Is it like that story just like was hidden because of the Roman Church and and even in that side, right? Like when you really get to the split of Catholicism and Christianity as we know it today, right? There's things about Christianity that Catholics don't believe, right? Like I have not been the studier of world religion, however, right? But Catholics don't believe that Jesus rose again, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like they don't believe in that part of the story. Like
I'm not aware of that.
What?
Huh?
I am not the person to ask about this, but I am shocked by that.
Like I'm not aware of that.
Like
I thought that was Judaism.
Is it
Judaism? Catholics don't celebrate Easter? I believe they do believe that.
I think they do, but there is a difference, and I think you're right. It is Judaism that just believes in the first, like the Old Testament, basically, not the New Testament.
Correct. I believe all Christians believe that he rose again.
Jesus rose again. Okay, gotcha.
Correct.
So either way,
all Christians.
Gotcha. So either way, right? Just getting.
But there is differences to your point.
Sure.
That's why they split. But let me say this: they didn't split because of spiritual reasons. They split because of the money
and power.
Straight up.
Religion.
Straight up. And this is my whole point.
Yeah.
This is my whole point. Go ahead, Sue.
I got a favorite example, and we've all read about this in the history books, but we don't see that when we're kids, and we don't think about the larger meaning. I believe it was King Henry VIII that just loves changing his mind on women and doing whatever the hell he could within the bounds of the Catholic Church to continue to change his mind about women until he was like, you know what? Y'all are just kind of getting on my nerves, so I'm going to create this whole other thing called Protestant. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to create, it's Protestant something. And we're going to break away from you guys so I can get divorced and y'all don't have anything to say about it.
Yeah.
And as kids, we're like, damn, that dude's an asshole. That's like literally how we're brought up. I mean, he literally had one of his wives decapitated, I believe, and just over some bullshit. And I feel like I'd be a great person to put on like Drunk History, that TV show. But the long story short, that is a perfect example of how someone just decided that there was a new way to worship the Lord because it was convenient for their personal agenda. So if it happens once, it's plausible. That's what I want to throw out there, because I love popping closed-minded bubbles. Just think, ask why, okay, if it happened one time, is it possible that it happened again? And we just heard a couple of history examples from the beginning. And I'd like to toss up just a philosophical question. So I agree with you, Kobi, that, I guess this whole universal truth thing is probably based around like, the commonalities in religion and what the one is. But long story short, I grew up and we were taught about the main pillars. I think we were exposed to at St. Chris, and I think St. Chris is probably in the same boat as a lot of other Western schools. So it's no knock on them. It's just what we happen to be taught. We were taught about Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and then there were mentions about some of the other options out there. But to me, like each and every one of those had similarities. And I'm like, y'all are fighting over this? You guys have like the fundamentals, and then we got all these extra things. You guys are fighting over this. And what that leads, like, I think you can take that with two directions. Either there was actually an occurrence that everyone saw and interpreted differently, but there were some commonalities, or there was the very first person to come up with this as a way to control the masses, and consequently more stories branched off from there, which is why there are universal truths. So that's kind of my thing.
I'll say this. I think most likely than not, it was a game of telephone.
Yeah.
All right. And Chris, to specifically answer your question, universaltruthschool.com. Right. And specifically, The Light of Egypt is the book that you want to start with. Right. Now, see, what's interesting, right? And that's where you want to start. There's a very, very, very long, right? And I want to remind you guys that every time a place is conquered, what happens is what? First and foremost, what do they do? Well, first they rape the women, kill the men, do all that stuff. But then what do?
They institute what? Government, religion, laws type thing? No?
Mm-mm. They take all the books, keep the ones they want, and burn the rest.
Does that remind you of anything happening today? Dr. Seuss? I don't know, banning shit on Instagram?
I would go even deeper than that, my brother. I would go deeper than that. My whole premise of where I stand with health. And why I can stand strong when people say, oh, you crazy. Oh, you this, you that. Just get the shot. It don't mean nothing.
I hate that argument.
You've been getting that a lot, huh? You've been getting that one a lot, huh? Just get the shot.
It don't mean nothing.
I've had to defend that over the past 2 weeks, a lot more than I felt like I needed to. I had a stranger.
Yeah, when society starts pushing you in one direction like that, it's so strong, when propaganda is so strong, you got to sit back, do whatever you need to do, and say, my goodness, what does my gut say? Because the true universal truth, the true God, I believe, lives in all of us. But can you hear? Can you listen? Are you able to hear and see?
You can't, because you're distracted. And that's
right. That's why you gotta what?
That's it.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
It's a very spiritual.
This is the heart of it. This is the heart of it. So for me, this thing was health for me is deep. I don't care about your weight loss. I love you though. I don't care about your this, that, and the third. All that are benefits. They're sides. They're side benefit. The truth of the matter is that what really matters is, can we get back, you individually get back to listening to that truth in you? And can you get back to that sixth sense that connects all of us to the point where we're not committing atrocities to our brothers and sisters? Because see, the interesting part is and when you look at the similarities in all of these things, and all of the religion we talk about, when you look at the similarities, what do we see? We see first and foremost, fall of man through what? Through food. And we also see, right? And then we see that these things that we now see are just normal. Oh yeah, you can eat the meat as long as you drain the blood. Oh, you can do this as long as you do that, bro. Oh, da-da-da-da-da. Oh, you can eat your brother if you're really, really hungry. Oh, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope, right? Because the truth of the matter is everything does matter, right? And these little things that we now take for, but what do you mean? Just a little bit of that, just a little bit of this, just a little bit of that, just a little bit of this, slippery slope, y'all. Slippery slope, right? It's a slippery slope. And nobody is a bad person. You're not bad. You're not terrible. You're not whatever. It's just we have had centuries of slippery slopes, do-do-do-do. And it doesn't even have to do with us most of the time. It just has to do with a small group of individuals who can influence our minds. Because how does the devil work? The devil doesn't actually have, the devil by all of these doesn't actually have power. What does he do? He tricks you.
That's right.
Into giving up your own power.
Yep.
You cannot be Your power cannot be taken from you unless you give it up.
Yep. Unless you adopt.
So what did he do?
Mentality.
He controls this.
Distracts.
Right. So we're here instead of being here in the truth. If you can't hear me, I'm patting my stomach, my gut. Right. The Horus. By the way, it's important we know our words, not just our numbers. Right. We don't. Right. We're here where you can mess with us, and then we doing things that's killing us. We think, oh man, health now, people live so much longer. Nonsense. Why do we say that? Because how you find that out? Oh, you read that in a book? Oh, word. Was it the one that was burnt, or was it the one that was? Oh, okay. It was the one that you were allowed to read. Got it. Okay, understood. Bro, this is so key. This is exactly what's going on right now. It's a whole nother escalation of what's going on what's happening right now. It's a whole nother escalation of that.
Yep. You know what I think is really interesting? I believe that the internet helped and hurt this whole issue. It helped in the sense that we are more easily able to see outside of what's happening right in front of us. Therefore, you're more easily able to like connect with somebody who's in a distant community and like and find out, wait, they make you do that too? Or hey, you do that differently and that's okay? Shit, that's not okay here. I kind of like that. So it's very interesting how the internet has all of a sudden enabled so many different viewpoints to be exchanged, which is why I am absolutely furious at the fact that people's accounts get deleted for things that have nothing to do with inciting violence. And that is such a broad like definition that gets applied to, I know health coaches. I mean, Kobi, you've had issues with that before. This guy just wants you to eat fruit.
Oh,
like, I mean, there's more to it. I don't mean to oversimplify. But like, how on earth can that be justified? Yep. So to me, you're right. It is happening. And instead of the paper
for a while now.
Yeah. So instead of
they've been trying.
And guess what? You want to know why I fucking respect the shit out of Kobi? Because this guy's got balls, ladies and gentlemen. Because a lot of the stuff that he wants to say, a lot of other people want to say that shit. But we're afraid. Why are we afraid? Why? Because of conformity and because of all these different accounts and profiles and people getting deleted and chasing followers. Guys, the chasing followers game is such a joke. Like, please do not allow it to happen. That is conformity winning in your life. Like, just say your voice, speak your opinion, and guess what? You are going to find other people that resonate. I didn't even know that dude Aaron earlier. And I spoke my mind, and I have literally never had somebody else tell me they shared my beliefs spiritually. So just speak your fucking mind and don't worry about like who's listening and don't worry about whether or not you're going to get banned because you'll find a way around it. So
and I'll say this. I agree with you, Stu, in a lot of ways, man. And I'll add my own little spin to it. I'll say, speak your gut, not your mind. Right? Because when you develop that connection to the gut, it's far superior to the mind. We've now been taught that here, cerebrally, the things that are happening up here, you're so much higher. You're just better. You da-da-da-da-da. It's that sense of betterness. But the gut doesn't tell you you're better. The gut tells you we are the same. The gut tells you your brother is just like you. Your sister just like you. Your whatever is just like you. But the brain starts tricking, right? When you look at Esau, Jacob, Christians, we gotta pay attention to this. We gotta pay attention to this, right? They exchanged their what? Their birthright for what? For food.
Can you like highlight the story for a moment, just a little bit?
Specifically cooked food.
Jacob.
Go ahead, Chris.
I probably got to leave this one to you. But Jacob and Esau were brothers in the Old Testament, right? Who was the favorite? Was Jacob?
So Jacob was second.
Okay.
No, Esau was. Esau had the birthright.
Yeah.
All right. Esau was the firstborn, had the birthright. And Esau goes out hunting, comes back, didn't catch anything, comes back hungry, says to Jacob, hey, let me get some of the food, delicious stew that you're cooking on there and what you doing. He says, okay,
sure.
But to do that, you give me your birthright. Because the firstborn has all the birthright,
So
and he traded, he's like, yeah, fine, whatever. Traded his birthright for a bowl of soup, dog.
Because he was hungry.
Yeah. And guess
instant
what?
gratification as exemplified in the Bible.
Now we can this all is much deeper than we're talking about. We're not gonna get too, we're already pretty deep, but we're not gonna get too deep. I just want folks to really understand that a connection of health to me is much deeper than money, is much deeper than any of this stuff, because it really connects. It really allows you to see the levels of layers of tricks that's been played. Unless you're able to strip down those layers, not only will you never be healthy, but you'll also never be able to regain that sixth sense that connects all of us and actually is the solution to all the things we say we care about. World hunger, all these atrocities,
world
all
peace.
the isms, just to include all of them, all the isms, all this division. We continue to divide. But see, when you divide, it never takes us up. It only gets us into smaller and smaller boxes, right? And if those things would work, if those things worked, we've had a lot of smart people walk this earth. We would have been solved these problems. We don't need our kids to be the future. That's nonsense. We would have been solved those problems. The problems that we're looking at, we cannot solve from the same paradigm that we're looking at them from.
Right.
And they won't allow us to look at it from those paradigm because they'll keep your attention. They'll keep bombarding you 24/7. Hustle, right, rat race. I gotta do this, blah, 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 blah. Never will you stop for a second, cut the noise, focus, right? And tap into and heal yourself and tap into your gut and then realize, oh, I got to go back to the farm. I don't actually need any of this stuff. It's all actually a trick. Right? And people will push, man. But it's for me, it's my central message for the rest of my life. This is my central, this is it for me. Because the more this thing develops for me, the more I realize, all that peace, all that stuff we're looking for, all that connectedness, all that love, all that stuff we're looking for comes from that. From that is the process. That's how we get there.
Still, I thought it was you, bro. I thought you were about to say
it was, but I got lost in the sauce right there. So I'm chilling.
Hey, listen, Aaron, and why am I blanking right now?
Greg?
No, Ash. I need all these clips. I pay for all of them. I need all these clips. This is it right here. I need all these clips. Don't cut me short. I need all these clips right here.
That's right, everyone. That's it. Because this is, man, again, this is a matter of getting the information and applying the information that's actually going to produce the results that we want to get to the life we want, right? It's come full circle with everything that we're talking about. Right. At the end of the day, you have to get new information. You said something key, that the paradigm that we look at these problems with has to shift in order for us to change the problem. Right. The paradigm they give us or that we look through keeps us in the same rut, keeps the distraction, keeps right, bombarding us. So that's actually the shift that has to happen. We have to change that paradigm. Who was it? Was it Einstein that said a problem can't be solved at the level of consciousness that it was created? Right. So like at the end of the day, like if this problem got created in this paradigm, at this level of consciousness of how you see things, then it can't be solved at the same level. You have to get to the next level to be able to solve the problem. And so that's what we're
right there.
Yep. Two things come up from that. One, to put the paradigm and the shift in a different verbiage for some other individuals. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Yet we are continuously told to take the same route, and we have the same government structures and bipartisan government and just all these different mechanisms around us that are continuously saying for the US, 200 plus years, of this is how we're going to solve things, because this is the party, and this year is going to change everything. And like, I think to me, all this can be answered with one thing. Like you said, like an elevated consciousness is able to solve the problem of a consciousness below it, reworded but in a different phrase. How do we do that? We do that by having coaches, not even just coaches, speakers, the right kind of influencers, artists, everything. People just being themselves and working and becoming healed so they can pass on what it's like to be a healed individual to their kids. And part of being a healed individual is learning how to make your own decisions and not just trust this institution to teach you the right way, because that enables you to be tricked. Just as if you would not want to have weed or alcohol or heroin or anything else dependent, like you being dependent on those things. Why do you want to be dependent on an institution that tells you how to live a great life, but they cannot provide that? They cannot, like, whatever they're doing isn't working. So my thing, trusting your gut is an absolute part of every. So for me, y'all know me, I come from like an engineering, numbers, like whatever, construction management background. I used to think it was all about mindset. I do think there is a lot of power in being able to stoically and rationally make long-term decisions by weighing different variables. However, sometimes there are too many variables, and Kobi touched on this, I believe it was last week. Sometimes there are too many different variables to make a decision. You have to trust your gut. Every single person out there, any manager that's worth his grain, weight in salt, whatever the hell the expression is, they will always tell you there will come a time when you have to trust your gut, because you don't have time to run all the variables and scenarios all the time. And how do you trust your gut? How do you think rationally? How do you protect yourself financially for what's worse when you start speaking the truth and they start saying, hey man, we don't really like what you're saying, like we kind of want people to go with this other agenda. If what you were saying wasn't true, we really wouldn't be worried about it, but instead we're going to have to shut you up. If you can't do any of that stuff without a foundation of learning how to control your emotions and think rationally about both short-term and long-term things, about how to get your finances right so you can provide for yourself and protect yourself, provide for your family. And guess what? It's not selfish, people. You can provide for your community once you're whole. You can't do that until you're whole. So please just soak on that for a little bit. And you can't trust your gut until you stop eating McDonald's every day. And it's way more complicated than that. Listen to Kobi, listen to Chris. Feel free to give me a listen too. We really are here to talk about the good life, guys. So I don't know.
Guys,
closing thoughts.
I actually don't think it's that complicated. I actually think that's part of the problem, that we're led to believe it's super complicated. It's not. It's not. And let me start by saying this, or let me end by saying this. If we're being divided into small categories and put into boxes, the solution cannot come top down. It must come grassroots, bottom up, right? And not just that. That means that as individuals, we have something to do. And what is it that we do? Well, we're talking about trusting your gut. I truly believe that it starts with actually taking care of your gut. Solid food vacation juice feast. Best tool I found. Best tool I found. Because you go from that, you can hit everything else. Your meditation, your whatever. All that stuff is dope. All that stuff is dope. But see, there's a reason that all these scriptures we're talking about didn't start with those things as being the fall. What we're consuming is not just physically hurting and killing us. It actually is hormonally, on a spiritual, on all of those levels, causing us so much harm that we don't even see it, man. If you may not believe in let me just leave with this last example. You may not believe in reincarnation, all this stuff, and I don't even know. Whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. But if you're eating a burger every other day or so, just consider that for a second. We know for a fact, whether you believe in modern science, whatever, that carries information. We also know there's some consequences to those things occurring, like taking life. When you're consistently altering your hormones, when you're consistently altering your DNA, when you're consistently altering these things, how are we going to get to a place where your gut working like it was designed to work? We're not. We're just point blank. We're not. Right? I felt, guys, I grew up eating meat, guys. I'm not even talking about just meat, by the way. I'm really not even just talking. I'm talking about consumption on a whole, because it's much deeper than that. I grew up eating all of these things, and I've been there, and I've been to the different version of you. You're not the same person. You don't think the same. You don't move the same. You don't act the same. You don't see things the same. If we are all at that level at once, that elevation of consciousness, that's what it takes. Individually elevating and getting that redeveloping that sixth sense that we all have, but it's now dormant, and we're putting it to sleep by all the things we're consuming. That's where we start. We start there because we drop because we start there as a society. We drop the stigma that goes with like, oh, okay, you're eating healthy now, huh? You're doing this now, right? It's like, why? Somebody makes a good decision, bro. Why are we trying to? Why? Because you're not elevated. You trying to pull their leg down. That's crazy. Why are we doing that? Right? The closest people to us too will do this. The closest people, the people we love the most, will do this. So that's why I say this. Listen, that's my mission. This is what I'm doing this year. This is what I'm doing probably every year after this. Is to really introduce as many people as possible to how do you elevate that level of consciousness, right? How do you elevate? I'm not saying I got all the answers, but I found one that definitely works. I found one that certainly works. And the more people around you do it, the easier it gets. And that's what I leave folks with. Like really, it's time for us to really get. Society is full of shout out Dougal. Shout out Dougal, man. Dougal on Instagram dropping nuggets over here. That's my guy first and foremost. A beautiful example of this stuff that I'm talking about, by the way. That man dropped damn near 100 pounds. Not just that, completely shifted his whole family around, shifted his finances, shifted everything around. This man right here is an example of what I'm talking about, as like us getting to a whole new level. We can do it. It's very doable. On an individual level, then on a group, on a family level, then on a community level, and then we go this way. Ain't nobody coming to save us nowhere. No leader coming to save us. Nobody's coming to save us. So you are your brother's keeper, right? I am my brother's keeper. That's why I'm sharing this stuff. And guess what, guys? I don't make hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this. I don't. You come to me, you can't pay for my services, bro. I got you. Because what I'm doing is beyond this fake fiat monetary system that's out here. I take gold bars though. Yeah. I just play it, but that's it. Hey, it's a good life. Chris, if you want to take us out, we're done for the day. That's all the nuggets you get for today. You join us next week, you're going to get more.
There it is. That's the way to end it. For those of you that hadn't checked in, we're not going on Clubhouse afterwards anymore. We're doing a pre-show. So now you can join us at 7 p.m. Eastern, which is 4 p.m. Pacific, only on Instagram, live on Instagram. You get a chance to check us out, have the conversation before we jump into this live where we go from 8 or 5 p.m. Pacific all the way till 9. to talk about, again, these incredibly important topics. Hopefully, right? And again, I know these guys. For those of you that are listening that maybe don't know, like, hopefully you check them out, right? Like, hopefully you go give Stu a follow. Hopefully you go give Kobi a follow. Like, hopefully you're saying like, hey, they're telling me things that I want to be able to learn, that I want to know, all of that type of stuff. And that is where it starts. Just like Kobi said, right? We are a brother's keeper. You're not going to get this information from the top because their job is to distract you. So you have to get it from this level. And these are some quality people to get that information from. We want you to live the good life, health, wealth, love, happiness, all of the things. We started this conversation talking about marriage. We ended it talking about health, which seems to be the root of all of these things. And that's why we got to get to it. So we want you guys to win. Let's go make this thing happen. Well, thanks for checking in on another week of The Good Life. We'll be back next Wednesday. Join us on IG Live and then back here on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Guys, enjoy the rest of your night.
We're not done. We're not done. We're not done.
Keep living the good life, guys. Later.